itemize their training, as I can see. The 138, 149, if you subtract that from the 183, I'm assuming that difference is their training of personnel.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask Mr. Vertest to just
Yep, go ahead.
help me come back to the 183, that's all I'm trying to do.
Sure, and let's make sure we understand. This proposal that I'm showing
Yeah.
you is the most recent breakdown I'd received from them.
Okay.
And it had been consistent. It's important to understand that this document is, for lack of a better word, obsolete. These numbers aren't gonna directly translate into their most recent proposal, because obviously 183 is more than what they've shown us before. But it is, when someone was asking, well, what are the hardware costs? Well, they're 72.8 as of
Yes.
September, right?
Okay.
That's what this breakdown is. So we're not gonna get a direct number, but we're gonna get to a number, and we're gonna say, okay, I got 183 here and something less over here that they proposed to us originally.
I'd come up with 106 if I add all those numbers together.
Okay. It would seem like it's greater than that, but,
So I'm adding, Mr. Vertest, I'm adding the 17,710, right? 72,8, the 15,750.
I get it.
Is there
Okay.
something
let me-
else?
yeah, let's see. If you start over again, I'm sorry, I
I'm
was
sorry,
looking at
so
the
I
back
looked at,
page.
I'm on second page where it starts with 1710, the network
Okay.
hardware, right?
Yep.
Second is 72,8,
Yep,
then 15,750.
yep.
And is there something else that I'm missing?
Well, there would, if you add those up,
106,
there's 106, we have 106,260?
yeah.
Right, but there's another $3,000 upfront cost. That's what the $3,000 shown for the leased connectivity, one-time fee is $3,000.
That's why that number looks weird on the other side. It's not 36,000 annually for the fiber. It's 3,000 up front.
Right,
Right.
And then the rest of the fiber
31.
maintenance is
31,
rolled into that
121.
31.
Yeah,
31,
okay, I get that.
So that 3's gotta be added to your
So
number.
109, 260.
All right, 109, 260.
Which is on the back page. If
No,
you look at the
it's-
back page.
No.
Yes,
He's
it is.
talking
Yeah.
about the 183.
No, I got
not,
it. So if you would, I get where my number comes up to 109, 260.
Right, and that's itemized on the back page.
So how does that relate to, so how does that relate to the 183? That's what I'm asking.
Right. I'm not prepared to
So
answer
well,
that question.
At a bare minimum, that 109 is in there.
Yep,
Right.
got
And
it.
the rest of it is probably training and the installation on their side, the stuff that we don't see.
Okay.
If I had to throw a number at something.
And I get that, and I'm supportive, I'm supportive of this, but I would have to say, and my mistake for not asking you this a week ago.
It's okay.
I'll admit that I should have asked.
No, that's.
But I agree with Mr. Servio. I just like to, now that we do have a difference, and I just like to see what that is. I'm not saying it's not resistance, I'm not supportive, but we have a duty to the residents to know what we're saying yes to.
Right. So if you look at the very back page of the document that we just supplied.
Yep,
So if you look, the 139,941.
yep,
That number is consistent.
Yep.
That number is the number associated with year 2.
Yep.
So that didn't
Agreed.
change, right? What they've done is they've taken that 138 number for 17,
yep,
and they've pushed some of it into upfront costs and some of it into monthly costs. Because our monthly cost for, our cost for the service is only 66,000 starting June 1st,
right.
right? So what I said to them was, I do not want a scenario where my upfront cost, which is what's happened in Clinton Township, keeps going. Clinton Township is keep on paying 17,000 a month, and they're not receiving a service. So I'm saying I want a clear delineation between what it takes for you to be up and running and what it takes for you to provide the service. So that 183 number isn't gonna go up, and we're gonna get to June 1 and they say, we're not ready, we can't start providing the service. Well, then I'm not gonna start paying you the 66,000, because you're not providing me the service. What I think a mistake was that occurred is when they mixed it all together, believe me, I don't think they were trying to somehow defraud Clinton Township any more than I think they're trying to do that with us. But what I have is I have a group of people at the county who are, by every measure I can see, competent in providing dispatch services. And someone said, okay, now I want you to be a salesman and an accountant. And they're saying, well, I don't know how to repackage what we do every day and make a proposal, which is why if they were a private company, they'd have salespeople that would do this. So their first proposal to us was like, well, just start paying us this much a month. And I said, well, I'm not really comfortable with that because I don't know when you'll provide that service. I don't know what hiccups can occur along the way. I said, separate your startup costs, whatever they are, and your per month costs, and give me two separate numbers. I'm not gonna tell you how to do it because I trust you. I believe that you're being honest with me. And when you have those numbers, tell me. And now I'll know that if for whatever reason, come the date you said you'd provide me service, you don't, I'm not paying you because you're not giving me the service. And I won't be spending $17,000 a month saying, when are we coming online? Oh, it'll be next week or whatever those problems are. And I'm sure there's two sides to those problems. But I don't want to be in that scenario where I'm paying for a service and I'm not receiving it.
Agreed.
So I said to them, separate startup and ongoing costs. Give me two separate numbers and I'll take that to the board.
Okay, we understand that. So, this is a simple question. Using Mr. Batante's numbers, we agree on the 109. Where's the other $74,000 coming from?
It's coming,
That's a simple question.
it's real easy.
It doesn't need to
It's
talk
easy.
about.
No, it's easy.
the same thing
I'll
we
answer
talked
it for
about.
you. Take a look at the back of the second document I gave you, the back. You just had it. It's right there. Right here. What's the total annual cost for 17? 138, 149 for leased fiber option. Do you see that number?
Yes.
Okay.
If they're splitting that in two.
So now they're taking that
That's a
and there's,
simple explanation.
right. Take 66 off of there and whatever's left, throw it on the startup costs. Because when they looked at it, they said, we're gonna begin January 1 spending labor to make this happen. So January 1, we're gonna put a bunch of people to work at our place. So we think that Joe is gonna spend 10 hours a week, and we're gonna have to hire Sally, and she's gonna cost this much, and we're gonna employ physical people that they can point to and say, well, what does that guy cost per day, per week, per month? What percent of his time is gonna be spent at Harrison over the next 60, 90, 120 days? So that's what they did. I said, I don't want that billing model because I don't think it's reasonable to ask me to pay for a service I'm not receiving. So separate those costs, give me a fixed startup cost and a fixed operational cost. But if you do the math, in essence, they just took money from one pile, put it into the other pile.
All right,
If this board would rather,
These
I'm
numbers-
sure they'd be comfortable with 109 up front and begin paying 138,000 a year January 1. I'm just not comfortable doing that, not knowing a date specific of when they provide the service.
Mr. Vickest, if you're gonna be fair about it, it's 109,000 plus the training. And the training is coming out to $75,000. That sounds absorbent to me.
It isn't training, it's a combination of labor.
No, it isn't.
Right. Well, I'm sorry, I can tell you the explanation, you may not agree with it.
I'm looking at the numbers here.
Okay. Here would be another way to look at it. Let's look at their original proposal. The document at the back, the page 4 of the second document I gave you. I'm gonna take the 138, 149, plus 139, 941, plus 109, 260 equals 387, 350. What was the document I proposed that we'd pay? 387, 350. So they are proposing to us, their original proposal was 109,000 in startup costs. One-time upfront costs. For lack of a better word, let's call that hardware. Then they're saying, well, we're gonna begin to expend labor January 1. If we sign this contract, we're gonna start working. So we wanna start paying our people, so we want you to start paying us a monthly fee. So I said, that's fine, but I don't know when that date's gonna start.
You've already told us that,
So-
and you
so-
don't need to go through it again.
Right.
What I'm saying is that training isn't worth the kind of money that the difference is there. I
What's it?
want them to justify it.
Okay,
It can't possibly take them 6 months to train a dispatcher.
it's not, it's a, okay, I'm answering that question. It is a combination of physical dispatch, right? That labor, that training, but it's also a combination of other people in their department establishing this. They're building into that costs for various people throughout their department. Think about it this way. Yesterday, they didn't have meetings to talk about dispatch. They didn't train firefighters. So far, they've sent personnel from the departments to Comtech. There's been some coordination or some date set.
From our
our department?
Yeah, there was something set up, because
They invited us over there just to observe. We haven't done any training.
I thought there was something, because the union contacted us saying, you know, we haven't agreed to it yet, why are our people being contacted? There was some issue where folks were asked to go to Comtech.
They invited us over there to
Okay.
observe. They were doing is they were building the software program for Clinton Township and Mount Clemens at the time, and they asked if we wanted to send a representative over there to watch that process.
Right.
So that's what we did, is we sent someone over there to observe.
Now, let's say we execute this contract, would it be reasonable to say that Comtech is going to spend some time interfacing with you as well as all line personnel to establish, I mean, is there some training that'll occur between the parties?
No, absolutely. There's a tremendous amount of work, and that's why when we make that statement that if we sign the deal today, the earliest, and June, I have to be honest,
I
is
agree.
ambitious. It's
I
very
agree.
ambitious. Wouldn't be surprised if that got pushed back to October. But anyways, there is that amount of time is partly to install equipment, but it's also the behind the scenes work of all of when the computer program recommends what vehicle to send on what response. I mean, we have to write all that into the program and tell them, you know, what vehicles to recommend for what type of call. All of that work gets done on the back end. That's what takes an amount of time of our personnel over there working with their personnel and representatives from the software
And
company.
it kind of ties back into when we talked about the fourth heart monitor that we purchased. Because in the past, we've said, hey, we've got an extra ambulance, our firefighter who is doing dispatch could make a calculated, intelligent, informed decision to say, hey, I've got 2 guys here, we got another run, go take that ambulance. That can't occur here. This software says very specifically to the dispatcher what happens. So when Alpha 1, our frontline ambulance, and Alpha 2, our second line ambulance, are both in service, and a call comes in, that dispatcher, through a series of software questions and decisions, can now say, well, we're gonna put this engine in service to respond, and then we're gonna alternately dispatch either another ambulance or some transport or some method. But if it's heart specific, we're sending that ALS rig that can respond in that situation. So what the county has done is said, this is what labor we think we're gonna have to spend to get up and running. It's informed based on what they did with others. I may or may not agree with it. I'm definitely not educated or informed enough to say that it's wrong, but I look at the county sheriff's department as a partnership that's definitely been a good working relationship. The amount of mills we pay for police service is a fraction of what our neighboring communities that have their own police department pay. If we wanted to say, to heck with this, we could never eliminate the step of an additional call to do our own dispatch. But we could go out and hire dispatchers instead of firefighters and have clerical personnel and train them. We'd still have to go through a lot of this. We'd still have to have someone to supervise them. We'd have to go through this same process. They already do it. Whether I like it or not, they've presented us with a price and said, this is what it would cost for us to
Mr.
outsource this
Burkest, I don't know
service.
how many ways I can say this. I'm not opposed to this whole concept. I'm asking for some breakdown on this labor, and you haven't been able to give it to me. I'm not willing to vote yes on this tonight.
Mr. Supervisor, here's what conclusion I've come to. So, $183,189, there's $109,260 in equipment, software, and licensing fees.
Correct.
The difference is $73,929, which I will interpret as implementation fees, labor for implementation.
That's correct.
Like it, don't like it, that's my interpretation of it. I don't know if it's high or low. I do know that I don't think we have a reasonable alternative, you know, and I support the notion of outsourcing this dispatch. I think the annual fee is in line with what we expected, including a lease. I have enough information with the hardware costs now, and I'll
With the-
interpret that.
Mr.
I
Bertani, is that a motion?
I was just
Okay.
gonna say, if
Yeah,
to move
you
this
know what?
conversation along,
If that's a motion,
Yes,
I'll
and
support it.
after this discussion, I'm gonna say it one more time, just so we're clear. I've come to the conclusion, that $109,260 is the equipment fee. They're charging us $73,929 for implementation. I get that. So I would make a motion, to execute the 2-year agreement with MCSD at a startup cost of $183, $189, billed in equal monthly installments, service fees of $64, $224, $17, $139, $941 for 18, billed in monthly installments.
I'll support that. Do you wanna add, just as part of the motion, the annual savings? Is that something we can figure out real quick?
Annual
I
savings.
don't think I could do the math on
I
that.
don't think.
Okay, that's fine. I'll support that.
All right.
Okay, so going back to something the chief said that got completely overlooked. The question is, why Clinton Township has 4 times as many runs as us, and they're paying $211,000, and we're paying 65% of their fee? That makes 0 sense to me. I'm paying 65% of what Clinton Township with a quarter of the runs. Before I can vote yes on that, I need to know the answer to that question. And I'm just saying if the chief is uncomfortable with that, I'm uncomfortable with it until I know that. And it would be helpful, and I'm not saying, to belittle anybody, but it would
No,
maybe be helpful if somebody from Comtech was here tonight.
They'd ask.
So we could
They'd ask.
actually, talk to them. You and Adam had privy to being in a meeting, right? The rest
No,
of
Adam was.
I never
was
sat in
not
a meeting,
involved.
yeah.
Okay, well, Mr. Verkast was in a meeting. The other 6 of us weren't, right? So this is a big move. We're talking a lot of money. There's some concerns. I understand that.
Yep. So let me address that. Sheriff Wickersham personally contacted me and said, "Do you want me to be at the meeting?" Captain Daniels contacted me this afternoon to confirm. Vicky Wolber, who is the in charge of the Office of Emergency Management, asked, and I said, "Well, I haven't heard anything from anybody on this agenda item. Not one board member contacted me to say, hey, what about this or what about that?" In our workshops and in our prior discussions, I never heard anybody say dispatch was a bad idea. When we talked about it, the 138 and the 139 annual fee was discussed. I said there was also some additional startup costs, and what they're likely to do is reduce the first year's fee, but transfer those fees to the startup costs. I don't have those numbers when we talked before. Nobody ever said a problem. The numbers they provided me haven't changed. The 387, 350 is the number they provided. So, in defense of the sheriff and his staff, he said, would it be helpful if I'm there? I said, I don't even think, to be honest with you, I thought this discussion was gonna be 5 minutes. I didn't anticipate this. In the future, I'll advise any board member, if there's questions like this that you have, and these sound like pretty significant questions, we can answer a lot of this prior
Half
to a
of them
board
come
meeting.
up after the chief made a statement that Darren and I are both on there.
But Bill, the
about-
first words out of your mouth were, I really would like a breakdown of this, and you're in the office
Yeah.
every day. You
And
could
I-
have asked for it.
And I also stated that I thought $140,000 for an annual fee might be a little excessive, although it's still a bargain for us. And according to the chief, we are overpaying.
Possibly.
Possibly, if you
You didn't
compare
say
it,
that,
if
you
you
said
compare it
possibly.
to what Clinton Township may be paying. Now, I do understand Clinton Township's paying right now, and they're not receiving any service, but next year they will have service, and they're still only gonna pay $221,000.
Right. That 139,941 that we'll pay in 18 is basically labor costs, as they're listing it, of 108,000 and maintenance costs of 31,000. Because there are maintenance fees for the software, there are renewals of licenses, there are tech individuals that'll come out and provide that support. And this is their best guess today. So, but all I was trying to say was, in response to the comment that you wish someone was here from Comtech, that was an answer that I made and a decision I made because I heard from no one about this.
I never
had-
asked for anybody from Comtech to be here.
No, Mr. York said, why isn't someone from Comtech here? I was saying it isn't fair to say, well, gee, what's wrong with those guys? Why aren't they here? They'd asked me if they need to be here. I said, if worst case, we'll table this till a future meeting. If the board is not comfortable making a motion, we can always invite you back. But I said, based on the fact that I've heard nothing from any board member and all the discussions we had prior to this were positive, I knew that the chief had said, and I'd asked, I'm happy that he's here, that there were parts of this that he didn't like, but just like him, my opinion is, I can't do it cheaper, I can't do it better. I only have one choice for a provider. I have a history with that provider through the police services where they've always been reasonable. They've come back and actually lowered their price in a future contract. And unlike providing police, they haven't really mastered providing dispatch services yet and assigning a cost to it. In time, I have no reason to believe the county won't be as efficient at this as they have been at providing police services to the township. And as they make that process more efficient and they have the ability to balance what their runs are across potentially now 4 customers, 5 customers between Sterling, Clinton, Mount Clemens, Harrison, and Washington townships, I think they'll probably be able to fine tune this number. But at this point, this is what they think it'll cost. I either trust them or I don't trust them. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Batanti with support by Mr. Tominello to execute the
Mr.
two-year agreement.
Supervisor, we never opened the floor for public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that. I'm sorry.
William Ardell, 20-year resident. I just wanted to say, thank you, Mr. Servio, for asking the chief to weigh in. On these projects, I think it'd be a good idea to, just for the residents' sake, I'm not saying this is a good idea or a bad idea, to have the chief weigh in, that's what we're paying the guy for, have the chief weigh in, and on these jobs and bring in the necessary people ahead of time. Now, how does the chief feel about slamming the door shut and only having the 27 firefighters and not having our 30 firefighters? But I do appreciate the chief weighing in on this, and I thank you, Mr. Servio, for having the chief weigh in. I wanted the chief to weigh in on this early on in the conversation. But thank you, board members.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment.
Okay, I'd just like to say 2 things. First off, I am not against this concept. I believe it's the proper way to go. I just have a problem with some of the numbers, and from everything I've heard for the last 45 minutes or so, I think that the county's guessing at it. I'd like them to make better guesses at what they think the costs are.
Look, based on the chief, I think that we're overpaying based on what Clinton Township's paying, and you know, unlike the sheriff, like you said, right, we get the sheriff for the new people, I mean, he puts it down, this is what it is for, you know, a deputy is $40,000 and we pay X amount for pension and X amount for healthcare and blah, 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 blah. This is the number, boom. Right? I guess it would be nice to have seen.
In addition to that-
and I still don't understand how we're paying 65% of the cost that Clinton Township pays with just a quarter of the runs. And I'll just leave it at that. And I'm not against this, never been against it, but I don't know, maybe I'm just uncomfortable with the numbers, and I'll just leave it at that. I'm not gonna argue about it anymore. I think we should just probably vote.
Well, based on what I've heard tonight, and, I mean, my thought is 2018, we'll have to decide on this again.
Correct.
Because this is a 2-year contract.
It'll be
So-
ultimately less than 2 years.
So if the county doesn't come back, if there's no savings, then that's really, I think, where I would crunch the numbers with the surrounding, you know, Clinton Township, Sterling Heights, sort of do a sense check then.
Right.
And then make a decision moving forward after that time.
And what I think is bound to happen with these things is, you know, I think it's important for all of us to understand. Macomb County has a good relationship, and the Sheriff's Department has a good relationship with this board and with Harrison Township. Macomb County has a good relationship with Sterling Heights, with Clinton Township, with Mount Clemens, et cetera. They provide the police protection for Mount Clemens, Washington, and Harrison Township. So we've had a kind of a chance to look at that. When we look at the offer that when we received this offer, we also received, or I should say, the email that provided this offer was sent to Washington and Harrison. Our proposals are very parallel, very similar. We're similar communities. So I don't know, I can't speak to how Clinton has the number they have, what agreements went into that, what sort of other things are a part of that arrangement. But just as much as we share a relationship with Macomb County, we all recognize that we share a relationship with Clinton Township and with Washington Township. In fact, it was a conversation directly between myself and the supervisor from Washington Township that led to saying, hey, we need one of these meetings to talk about this because there's parts of this contract that we're not comfortable with, which led to a revised proposal. In the beginning of all this, and how they figured it, and what they figured it, and why they structured their contract with Clinton and Sterling, I can't speak to. But in a long-term sense, I can't see a scenario where any one of these 5 communities is gonna be paying an abnormal share for that cost. How did they acquire that number or arrive at that number with Clinton? I don't know. Maybe they're losing money on that deal, and maybe they're sorry they executed that. I can't speak to that. But I don't anticipate, as Mr. Badkin said, getting a year or two down the road, having multiple communities doing dispatch, and not having the county being able to look at this and say, okay, now that we've done this, we do know what our startup costs are. We do know how much time we spend with the firefighters drafting our software and our procedures, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, I don't think their history, for example, with other communities has led them to believe that this is as easy as they thought it would be.
Well, I know I'm taking a lot of time on this, but let's take a scenario of the water department. We've had in the past underbilled for our water, for the actual product. So what happens? The fund is depleted, so you have to overcharge to compensate for that, correct? Well, I believe what's happening here is the reverse. As a contractor for 40 years, if someone asked me to do a job that I'd never done before, but it looks like there's money to be made there, I might bid that job, but I'm gonna pad it. Because I say, I could really take gas on this job, because maybe it'll take a lot longer than what I'm figuring it might, because I've never done it before. And I believe that's what's happening here. And I think what the proper thing for them to do would be to make the fee more reasonable, and if they ramp up and they've lost money on it, then you charge everybody a little bit more to make up for that.
Right, and here's the exception to that scenario that I think needs to be understood. Because I too was in a position, being self-employed, working for myself, looking at a job, trying to decide what that was. And like you, if I thought it was gonna be a little trickier than I thought, I might pad that number. The difference is, if I quoted, say, $2,000 to do a project, and it turned out that I was high, I usually didn't go back to the guy later and say, hey, you know what, I was $500 high on that last one, knock $500 off the next one, because I was a for-profit individual. The difference here is what we're in essence saying is, number one, do we believe that the county is padding this, or are they giving us an honest estimate? Hang on, let me finish. And number two, if they are giving us an honest estimate, and if at some point in the future they realize that they overshot that, do we have a relationship where they'd come back and say, we can adjust our future pricing based on an error we made in the past? I'm saying to you, based on the relationships that we've had in the past, I believe this is their honest estimate, and I believe that if they've missed that mark in either direction, they would probably come back to us and tell us that. But none of us will ever be able to know that for sure.
Fair enough.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Batanti with support by Mr. Tominello
Roll call, please.
to execute the 2-year agreement with Macomb County Sheriff's Department at a startup cost of $183,189, billed in equal monthly installments, and service fees of $64,220 for 2017, and $139,940 for $41 for 2018, also billed in equal monthly installments.
I do have one question. Is O'Leary from Washington Township moving forward with the same package? I don't know the answer to that question.
Nor do I. He hasn't called me since receiving the proposal. Numbers didn't change. I don't think that, I didn't see his initial proposal.
I know him as a pretty conservative guy, that's why I'm asking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just looking for a second, check mark to say, hey, this is good or not.
Yep.
So I'm gonna tell you, if Washington comes back with different numbers, we're gonna have a problem.
All right, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Batkins?
Yes.
Mr. Servil?
No,
Mr. York?
No.
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Verkest?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Excellent. Thank you, board.
And I just say that based on what the chief, I think we can get a better deal.
I think we've all been pretty clear in our positions, that's me. Okay, item F2, board members, at the November 14th, 2016 regular board meeting, we ratified the tentative agreement with the firefighters union with the exception of the change in pension multiplier from 1.8 to 2.0 for all firefighters hired after December 19th, 2014. In order to make that change, it's required that the Board of Trustees be provided a supplemental valuation from the pension plan's actuary. This supplemental valuation was provided to all board members back on December 15th, 2016. I am now asking that the Board of Trustees approve the change in the pension multiplier from 1.8 to 2.0 for all firefighters hired after December 19th, 2014.
So moved.
Is there support?
Support.
Okay, so the reason that you need to have a supplementary valuation, which quite honestly should have been attached to this so the public could see, which it wasn't. The actuarial study does say that we are going to, I believe it was 1.73%. This proposed change is gonna add 1.73% cost to the pension system. Now, it sounds not like a lot of money, but when you take a look at the current pension system and the fire pension system, I just want everybody to know what's going on here, so there's no, later on, oh, we didn't know this. Currently, the member contributions are 10.45%, and the township's paying 41.8% currently to the pension system based on total wages. The pension system currently is only 54% funded actuarially.
As of December 31st, 14.
But if you read, they took in the 15 numbers, which we had losses. And if you read the recommendation on the documents that I provided on A9, it says, although the system is 54% funded on a funding value of assets, because we smooth over, pluses and minuses in the investment accounts, it is only 51% funded on a market value basis. So while actuarially it's 54%, the reality is we're only 51% funded, and you take off that 1.73, now we're 49 point something funded. And if you look at page A11 that I provided from the actuarial statement, from '04, we were 100% funded in the pension fund, and we've gone down every year, 93, 92, 93, 75, 70, 68, 65, 63, 58, 54, but we know that the reality is that that number is actually 51%. There isn't even a trend line here that you're even stabilizing in your pension fund, and now we're going to essentially raise up the multiplier when this fund was getting some relief. As these new people were coming in at 1.8, we were gonna get some relief in these funding numbers, hopefully to start swinging it upward, because we're not giving as big a benefit.
I'm sorry.
And I just want everybody to understand that that's a lot of money. And what doesn't seem like, oh, it's only 2%, well, it's 5%, that could be, what, I don't know, 25 years from now, my guess would probably be that the fireman average salary is probably gonna be, probably 100,000 isn't gonna be out of the question, we're already at 87 on average. That's $5,000 a year for 30 years per fireman, roughly, it's 5%. You're increasing the total by 5% over their lifetime, and just roughly $5,000 times however guy retires, and they all retire because they come in early, you know, at 45, 46, somewhere in there, 50 years old, and given life expectancy, you're looking at 30 years. So just be aware of that.
Mr. York, I just have a question for you, just because I'm more familiar with the employee pension side. The 2014 actuarial numbers that are there, the 54.1, there's nobody in the plan at that point in time when this number was taken that was earning the 1.8 multiplier. That was never taken
Correct.
into any of the actuarial. So when we look at the 54.1%, that number doesn't include any of the projected savings for people going from a 20-year retirement to a 25-year retirement, or going from a 2.5 multiplier down to
2.8.
or 2.8 multiplier down to a 1.8, or now as proposed a 2.0. So the 54.1, although you say, oh, it's 51, it's probably, at this point, once you get your actuarial, it should have some impact based on those new members, correct?
I am just reading what the actuarial study said at that point in time.
Right, no, but I'm asking,
Right,
I'm asking for
right.
clarification,
And-
just because
and-
you're that
and-
liaison, you've been there since '04.
This is what I know. We have 4 members under the 1.8. Probably not going to make a big difference, to be quite honest, in the actual event. And it won't make a big difference because
that's
we're
not
so
true.
because we're so far underfunded. As a matter of fact, they even said in this actuarial report that we should be putting in an extra $1 million into the account. That was their recommendation. If you read the page, it says we should be putting more money in. At some point, you have to pay this money out. And where it's gonna collapse on itself is, and I know Ken and I don't wanna get into this discussion, is when you have 12 people retire within the next 3 to 5 years, that moves from the unfunded to the we have to pay it out column. And you're gonna see those numbers drop considerably on the percentage of funding.
Doesn't,
That's just the way it works.
do you on
I'm
the
not an
pension board,
actuarial.
do you and the pension board take that into account though when you build out these actuarial assumptions? I mean, you're on it, so you set those numbers. So what's,
Correct.
so those assumptions are already built into what the actuarial.
They
is.
assume that a percentage of the employees are gonna retire each year, but when you have a small department,
That's
it may
correct.
not happen. You know,
Right,
if you
but the
had
actu-
10,000 people in there, those actuarial numbers are pretty accurate. But
So
not when
we-
you got 27 members.
So for example,
But we build those assumptions for them. They don't tell us
for
what the
example,
assumptions are.
we build in like 0.06 or something persons are gonna retire every year.
No, that's not
That's
true.
built in.
The assumption isn't based on how many people retire. The assumption is based on what age they retire. There's an assumed age or years of service of retirement. It's based on actual individuals
But
and
he
their
also
age.
takes into account,
It's not based on how many retire per year.
but no, they take that anticipated age and they amortize it off and it's like 0.6 or something. It's like a small number and he adds that in.
Okay. So you'd
But
indicate.
it doesn't matter. This is the deal. Keep in mind, the fund is only 50% funded. You're gonna have a bunch of people retiring. You're now increasing the multiplier. We won this, and I say this again, we won this particular item after arbitration. The arbitrator ruled in our favor that the new guys, it doesn't affect the current guys. The arbitrator ruled for the 1.8. We paid $100,000 to do it. I don't know why 2 years later, we're raising it up.
Well, let me
That's
just say
all I'm
one thing.
saying.
We went from 2.8, just so that's a fact.
Correct.
It was 2.8, and then arbitration went to 1.8. So as part of negotiations, there's a partial give back to the new hires. And I would suggest that while I understand what you're saying about the level of funding, the level of funding isn't primarily being driven by that 0.2%. It's being driven by investment performance, which the investment performance, we know that there was a significant problem in those early years, but hasn't the investment performance lagged as well? I'm trying to say, what is the bigger issue here? Is
So-
it that 0.2%?
So
or
what
is it
happened, I'll give you
performance?
the issue. I'll just be blunt about the issue. The issue is very simple. In 2000, if you look, we were 100% funded in 99.
Right.
Up through 2001. Where the fund went bad was at that point, you had a 25-year and out.
Right.
From people that were hired in 97. At that time,
What time?
it was around 2002, I believe,
It was '02, it was 2000.
when they went from the 25 to 20 and out, is where you start to see this fund.
That was in
over
2000.
Over the last 10 years.
It was in 2000. It went up. It went up and stayed stable for the 5 years following that. So it didn't happen. Where the big step, we went from 93% funded to 75%
Where it
funded.
hits, Ken, and you know this because you sit on the employee pension, is as these people retire, it hits you more because you had from, if you had people, wait, hear me
I
out. If you
disagree.
had people
I just-
from 96 that were hired and you're funding it, and in 2000, based on a 25-year pension, and in 2002 or 1 or whatever.
It was
you
2000.
You switch it to 20 years. You have a 5-year unfunded gap for 5 years prior for every one of those men that went from 25 to 20 years, which is a considerable amount of money.
And the
Correct,
point I'm
but
making-
but
And
no,
then- and
but
then
no
what happened
funding
from there-
level.
And then what happened from there is, you have this big unfunded amount, and then, let's just face it, there was a couple good years of investments, then we had a recession.
Right.
So you combine both of those factors, it's not just one factor, it's some people retiring here, it's changing it from 25 to 20, and you throw all that bucket in, and we have a situation where we went from 100%, and in 10 years, we're now at 51%. I can't change those numbers.
Thank you.
I
My,
don't-
my point, sir,
You know-
is that this 0.2% is not what is causing the problem in the pension fund. There was serious negotiation, there was binding arbitration, we made significant progress, and there's a bit of a payback. I don't view that, I hear what you're saying, and the numbers are accurate, but I don't view that as what is driving the problem with the pension fund. That's my point.
Two big things that have impacted our funding level. One is investment performance, as you
Right.
pointed out. The assumptions have not changed, so none of those things are even impacted in this statement. The second thing that happened is in 2012, the board made the decision, or sometime after the 2012 statement, to go from a constant 30-year amortization and keep pushing that further down the road to actually reducing that amortization of the unfunded actuarial accrued liabilities. So you can see, in 2012, we were 63% funded. Then we dropped to 58. Then in 14, we show 54. However, no actuarial study has been done to date to show that because pension plans are based on eternity, that for eternity, someone is getting less than 2.8%. So as you pointed out, 0.2% was a 1.5% increase? The
Well, they said
0.2
it was 1.73, I believe.
Was it 1.73?
The actuarial study said 1.73, and out of that, it's 1.38 that we pay, and then the firemen pay the other
Okay.
5/10.
So if the 0.2 increase is a 1.73% hit, then it would stand to reason that we realized a 17.3% savings when we dropped 5 times that. Would have been, say 9%. About a 9% reduction when we dropped one whole from 2.8 to 1.8. So, sure, we went down through arbitration, 9% roughly, but through the negotiation process, when we looked at that number, in essence, we said, okay, we'll kick back 1.3%, 1.4%, you guys have to put in a
You
certain
got a
percent of that.
22-man department that are all eligible for that 2.8 at 20 years. Or if they stay longer than that, which you told me recently that there are some that, and the chief told me there are some that are eligible. So instead of 56%, they're gonna go up to 58 or 60% of the number that you come up with for the best 3 years out of 5 or whatever the factor is.
I guess I don't understand
So-
that. This move doesn't have anything to do with the people that are at the 2.8%.
We do not have
I
any
know, but
tools
the
available to
fund-
reduce the
The fund is gonna
pension
be
for.
depleted at a
Well-
faster rate because of that, because of the old one. We can't undo and unring the bell, I understand that.
Correct.
Right.
Will everybody agree that this isn't gonna help the fund by increasing that multiplier 0.2%?
No, but reducing it from 2.8 to 1.8 and now back to 2.0 it's still a 0.8% reduction in the multiplier.
I don't think
I
you can look
agree.
at that in a vacuum, and there's a negotiation, there's a give and take. That's the way I look at it. We still have a substantial savings.
There's other ways
Well,
to.
that's not, no, that's not true. She took that into account in the
No.
actuarial evaluation.
No, it
she
acknowledges,
had to.
it acknowledges that that it hasn't been adjusted for the savings, it says so.
It says it never took into account, there's never been an actuarial study done for that
Well, we're gonna
2.8
get
to
that
1.8.
this year. It's unfortunately, it's a 2-year lag.
Right, right.
Unfortunately,
That's
that's
all. Okay.
just the way that these
I
actuarials
just
run.
don't want us to ascribe so much of the problem with the pension fund to this particular
No,
action.
it's several. I'm
Agreed.
just saying.
100%
This is what I'm
agreed.
saying. This has a negative impact on that current fund. That's all, that's the
Right.
statement.
But we've never realized the positive effect of the changes that were acquired during arbitration, which is also true.
Which
Why
is
mit-
5 times this
Why
amount.
mitigate part of them is what I,
Because the contract is negotiated as a whole, so we gave this, but maybe we would've had to give something else on the other side. I mean, we're looking at this one specific item from the entire
understand.
contract.
I just-
So, you know, I mean, like, because, I mean, you weren't on the board officially yet at the time that this was ratified, I don't think. And so, you know, we look at the contract as a whole, this item had to hang out here because of this actuarial study. But the contract wasn't negotiated specifically on just this item, it was an array of items.
I just don't want somebody sitting here 20 years from now saying, you know, this fund is underfunded. This is why these pension funds you keep hearing that they're going under, is because everybody just keeps increasing the benefits. And that's all I have to say.
I haven't heard of I mean, other than Detroit, there's, you know, there's none that have gone under yet, but there are
Well, I'm
issues
telling you,
with
once we
funding.
get under 50%, keep in mind, that's the trigger for the treasury. That's just flat out. When they check those, remember, he stands up there and talks about the check marks? Right?
But when you
When
say-
you go under 50% funded, keep in mind, that is going to be a trigger at the treasury to come and look at it.
When you say
That's
keep
the state law.
increasing the benefit, though, we haven't done that, though, have we?
Well-
Didn't we reduce the benefit?
Right,
You
we're-
seem to be not considering that.
No, I am.
I guess this is an add back, you're right, but we have significantly reduced the multiplier. It is significant.
But you only have-
2.8 to,
My point is, you only have 4 guys on that
But-
1.8. It gets
Oh.
built in, it starts to, you
Right.
sat on the pension
Right.
fund with
Of
us.
course.
So as guys retire and new guys come on the plan, now you have more guys at the 1.8.
Right.
Which changes the actuarial.
Right.
Until
Okay.
you start building more of those people into the plan at 1.8, you're not gonna get the considerable savings.
okay.
Well, within the next 6 months, we'll have 5, which is 20% of the, over 20% of the department.
33% of the
I'm just saying, don't be surprised if these numbers start coming in and they're, 45% funded.
I don't know how your
Right.
performance in the.
This,
I'm just saying,
can
don't
get
be
further funded,
surprised.
and
what's
don't be
worse.
surprised that this isn't the reason why,
That's
and whether
my
we change
point.
this or not, it's still gonna be 45%
That's my
funded.
point.
And that's fine.
Well, it's not fine, but it's not
I'm
within our
doing my
control.
job as treasurer to let you know that this is gonna have a negative impact. That's why the law is
Actually, that's the
written there.
actuarial's job.
That-
That's why
that-
everybody got the actuarial study.
That's where,
and he did say it's a negative impact. It's
Well,
minor,
Who
1.73.
could possibly think that changing the benefit from 45% after 25 years to 50% after 25 years was gonna save us money? Did any board member here think that by going from a 25-year pension where you get 45% of your final average compensation to changing it that now you'll get 50% as your benefit per year, did any of you think that would save us money when we talked about this numerous times? Because if you did, you definitely don't understand some basic parts of
You're
math in the
referring to
pension system.
the new hires.
All new hires, if they work 25 years, currently their contract says they'll get 1.8 times 25 or 45% of their final average compensation as their annual benefit amount.
And there's five-
This would now change that so that any of those people in that class will get 50% of their final average compensation as their annual benefit. If you guys needed the actuary to tell you that that was gonna cost us money, you definitely have a basic level of understanding of the pension system that you need to brush up on. So if anybody was surprised by that study, and if any part of this discussion is new to anybody, there's a need for that person or those persons to go out and learn more about pension systems. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll open up the floor for public comment.
William Bardell, 20-year resident. I can tell you this, in the private sector, multi-employer contractors' pensions who fall below 80% funded, and that's with all the advanced analyzing. Once we fall under 80%, and Mr. Batkins, you probably know about this too, once you fall below 80%, you have to report to the state on what you're going to do to get back above 80% funded. So if this is something that you agreed on with the contract, then you got to eat it. But let's in the future keep in mind about these pensions, and you've got to be about 80% funded. You can't drop below. I know with the our multi-employer contractors in the private sector, in the skilled trades, if we drop under 80%, we gotta do some serious things. And that's just what we have to do. We have to report to the state on that. So if it's already agreed in the contract, you gotta eat this one. But let's, keep our pencils sharp and keep an eye on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. Any further comment, board members? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Batanti to approve the change to the firefighters union contract, changing the pension multiplier from 1.8% to 2.0% for all firefighters hired after December 19, 2014. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Thank you, board. Next item on the agenda, item F3. Board members, the general fund charges an administrative fee to other separate township funds for the services that the general fund provides, such as payroll, human resources, income tax, property tax collection, water and sewer fees, so forth. Currently, we charge the library a fee of $6,500 annually. We do have a slightly different relationship with the library in that we provide them with their location. I've had discussions with the library board and the director. They've indicated that they plan to stay at that location for at least 4 to 5 years. The library does pay for utilities, but the cost of building maintenance has never been determined. I am proposing that we increase their annual administration fee from $6,500 to $9,000 annually and agree by board action that we will be responsible for all future building maintenance. The building is owned by the township. We would be responsible for the maintenance regardless of whether the library was occupying the space or not. For example, in the past, we've repaired or significantly replaced the roof. Most recently, there were some repairs in the amount of about $1,200 to the roof. And certainly it needed to be done. The question is, who pays that bill? And right now, we don't have an agreement where we say, well, you pay this or we pay this. $1,200 probably isn't gonna break the library budget, and it certainly won't break the general fund budget. But what if we have a larger expense? So for example, as I've indicated, note that one of the rooftop HVAC units does not work, it's need of replacement. There are 2 units that heat and cool that space. Right now, we put that load on one of them. When I became supervisor over 6 years ago, it was not working. It had recently failed. Right now, if that unit goes out, there is no heat or air conditioning for that entire space. And we're putting a pretty significant load on one unit when you consider it's designed to have that load spread across 2 units. The question is, I think we had estimates somewhere in the $7,000 range. Is it reasonable for me to say that the library should pay that? If they're there for 5 years and they leave and it's township space, do they want some of their $7,000 back? They say, well, we only used it, maybe it has a lifespan of 12 years and we only used it 4. We want 2/3 of it back. Right now, we don't really have a clear understanding. Regardless of what the agreement is, we know that the voters of the township voted to establish a library millage because although it was a small majority, a majority of the voters said, we think a library is something that we want in our community. I don't think I certainly know I'm not looking to put a burden on the library, but if I'm gonna make some investment in that building and maintain that building, which I'd have to do whether they're there or not, I could argue that the heater and air conditioner run more frequently, knowing that they're in there 40 hours or 42 hours a week. Whereas normally I probably would shut it off a lot more often, so maybe it wouldn't wear out as fast. We'll never be able to finally determine what that number is, but we've been operating at a $6,500 fee for the last few years, and we don't have an agreement. I'd proposed to that board something, we'd had a discussion. I told that library board that I'd bring back to the township board a proposal. I'm suggesting we revise their fee to $9,000, but we assume the cost of the maintenance of the building.
Mr. Vickes, I seem to remember something a couple of years ago where I believe it's the state of Michigan told us that we had to account for amortization on all of our infrastructure. And you know, this building has a life expectancy and you have to put away a certain amount of money to replace it when the time comes. I assume that this $6,500 is all we're charging them, there's no rent involved. Are we paying the utility bills for the?
Nope, I've said, they pay their utilities, but, you know, we provide services. For example, you know, library taxes, people pay a millage rate. They're gonna come in and pay their fire and police millage at the same time to the township, but we do actually collect that library millage. We administer benefits, you know, there are services we provide. I mean, maintenance guys go in there and check it. We have a bill for alarm or, you know, we salt the parking lot. You know, there are things we do. It's difficult to quantify them because we probably do most of those things anyways if the space were being used for Boy Scout meetings or, you know, township condo association meetings and things like that. So there really isn't necessarily a whole lot of additional expense, though those things that are an additional expense, they do pay for. Again, you know, their own phone service, cable service, utilities, so forth.
You know, $9,000 probably isn't enough to do the administrative just on the checks and the benefits. I'm not talking taxes, we can't collect on the taxes, but like, I mean, compared, you know, we pay.
We charge.
Fire and water sewer, they pay a considerable amount.
$110,000 a year.
Right, I don't know if you break that down per employee, right?
No,
But, I
you
mean,
can
it
certainly
seemed to me-
justify a larger number.
All right, so now that you're bringing these issues up, right, we should probably get into some type of lease arrangement for that building with the library, because they are their own taxing authority, to make it official. No, I'm being honest, you know, they're their own taxing authority, and they should probably be leasing the building from us for a couple $100 a month, and that doesn't have to be a lot.
Well,
You know,
the-
the depreciation, like you say, the air conditioning. We're probably gonna have to replace an air conditioner sooner than later, because that building is now occupied 40 or 50 hours a week, when before it was occupied, I don't know,
Less.
8 hours, I don't know, somewhere 6-8 hours a week.
Right. In essence, that's what I'm proposing. If the current fee were $6,000, that'd be about $500 a month. I'm proposing to increase it to $750 a month. But to establish, in essence, that rental kind of relationship that you might have with any other lessee. Because as you said, they have their own board, they have their own taxing, they have, to an extent, they have a taxing authority. I don't know if they have their own autonomous taxing authority, but they certainly have their own responsibility for their budget and the oversight of the operation of the library. I'm not looking to bankrupt them. If I said instead of $9,000, let's make it $29,000, that just means it's $20,000 less service that they provide for library services to the residents. I'm just saying that I think we should make a nice number that's evenly divided by 12. We can increase it and say, but in exchange for that, we're gonna assume the maintenance of that building. I could look at it the flip side. If they weren't in there, I wouldn't be getting $9,000 a year to help with the cost of maintaining the building. We never charged anyone else before it.
This
for
isn't a
long time.
contract or anything, this is just a fee that's gonna be set now if we approve this, and it's gonna run until such time you revisit it.
Then we talk about it
Right,
again,
but
right?
that's not that's the lease and the administration and all the
Right.
benefits we do and everything.
I was going somewhere
for
with
them.
this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What I think is, I brought up something about, you know, the state says that you're not supposed to make money, but you're not supposed to lose money. I look at this the same as the building fund or water and sewer. It's kind of like an enterprise type thing. So I think in the future, we need to look at this and see what our true cost, including the depreciation and maintenance on the building, and evaluate whether or not this is a fair number or if it's too low. I have no
Let's say
problem
this.
with doing this right now.
We know this, similar to the discussion we had with the county, they can't find someone else to collect their taxes. So the number is up to us. They probably can't go somewhere else and rent that space with maintenance for $9,000 a year. If we want to know the true cost, it's definitely above $9,000 a year.
I mean, for example, on like the air conditioner, I would really like to see them sharing the cost in that, to be quite honest.
But this is the whole
Right.
point. In essence, what we're saying is, how do you share in the cost of something? Either who owns that? The library does not own that space.
Correct.
The township owns that space. They occupy it. I don't think this is a problem that needs to be solved. It's a problem in the sense that if that air conditioner went right now, the other one, well, first of all, we got a big problem because we have no heat in the room, and number two, who pays to fix it? And we haven't addressed it.
Okay,
So
well,
what I said
That's
is
why
we
you
need
need
to
to
talk
have a
about.
lease agreement or something.
That's why I said
my
we.
point.
That's why I said we need to talk about it now when when our backs aren't against the wall.
I agree with you that they shouldn't have to pay for that air conditioning unit, because normally a landlord includes rooftop units and one circuit in a building. When you rent a building and you build it out the rest of the way yourself, or if it's already been finished, you pay more rent. Of course, that's a for-profit enterprise, and we're
Correct.
not a for-profit, so, and I wanna make money on it, but I think we're losing money even at 9,000 probably.
But let's just say we there's no doubt we're losing money in a traditional sense if we were for profit. But let's say I said the number should be 30,000. Let's say we said it should be 3,000 a month, and that's what they'd have to pay outside to get that space. I just took away, $27,000 worth of services in the form of books and computers and subscriptions for every person who uses or could use that library. I didn't gain anything. It's a transfer of funds. I don't believe that when people voted for a $500,000 for the library, they said, hey, well, really, 20% of that should go to the.
I mean, that's really not.
You're
No
assuming
offense,
that.
that's not a great argument because the same can be said about anything we send taxes on.
Right.
But the argument is that the to be able to differentiate some of the incremental cost for that unit as opposed to what we already provide, it's next to nothing, from an incremental cost increase. We didn't hire anybody on our side to administrate anything. We didn't add a building. We didn't, we didn't have new maintenance costs. These are the same. We should have replaced that airtop unit
I agree.
before.
Before they probably even became a public library.
That's what I'm saying. It
should
was
have
our
been.
liability to start with.
But on
So-
the other hand, 2 years ago, we ran into something at EDC that Glenn told us that he brought something down to Darren's office 20 minutes after I turned in a check request, and he said, you can't do this. And basically what that law said, it's a state law, that you can't give away services to anybody.
No, you can't donate money.
You can't engage in charitable activity.
You can't engage in
No,
charity.
it's more,
No, it was charitable activity.
Yeah,
Right, you
if that's
can't-
what you're talking about.
Right. Which is why every year when we talk about
mentioned-
donating,
they mentioned baseball diamonds as one of the criteria, that you can't give a baseball diamond away that you own for free. You have to charge something because you incur a cost to maintain that. And that's why the school charges what they do.
yeah, I think we're mixing two different things there. There's no inherent requirement that you
At
charge
any
a
rate, we've
fee.
been here a long time. I have no problem with your proposal tonight. I think we should just look at what our actual costs are.
I can tell you right now, I see no value in spending time and money to come back and tell you the number is $30,000 or $40,000.
What time and money?
Why come back? I'm telling you right now, it's more than $9,000.
I'll tell you why you come back, because the general fund should not be subsidizing the library when the library has their own tax. That's exactly why.
Well, Mr.
And if it-
York,
and
if you're
it's
feeling up to it and wanna
$12,000
spend the time, spend the
or
time.
9,000, I don't know what that number is. But there is there's two numbers. There's an administrative number, and then there's some depreciation number for air conditioners and the building and this and that. I don't know what those numbers are, but when the auditor comes in, I'll certainly ask him what those numbers are, and he can probably calculate it pretty quick, because they do that anyways as part of their, as part of the audit.
That's where I was
So
going
this is
with
not,
it too.
this is not for any particular length of time, is that correct?
Until such time
Until
that
such
we
time. So
think it
why
should
don't
be
we-
modified.
maybe we could
Figure
move
out our
for-
actual costs from the auditors and figure it out from there.
So, like I did before, I'll make a motion to increase the Harrison Township Public Library's administration fee to $9,000, agreed by the board action, and that will be responsible for all future building maintenance.
All right,
Support.
motion by Mr. Batanti, with support by Mr. Tominello. Discussion, board members, we had a fair amount. Hearing-
Again, I'd just like to see it visited to try to determine some number, and Darren said he has an option to do that.
Excellent.
I have no problem with the motion on the floor right now.
Okay. Hearing no other comment, and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. All right, next is item F4, per trustee's request to add, an item to the agenda, regarding, a ZBA fee, and I can't speak to it, so I'll trust you guys can.
You can do it, or I can do it.
I think it's,
So, as board representative then, we have a resident that's been, before the zoning board of appeals, on 3 occasions, looking for a, variance relative to, setback, front yard setback. They've presented 2 different plans. Both were, I think, one was denied, then there was a table, and then another denial. And now they're up before us again tomorrow night, and they have paid so far $800 to appear before us, 2 separate fees of $400 apiece. And at our last meeting, they're they would like to present a different plan tomorrow night where they've made a modification. And the board at that time had talked about an accommodation for this resident, since it would be their 3rd paid
Fee.
to request that the Board of Trustees waive the fee for this particular presentation. So I'm making that request
And,
or a
and
motion.
so you're saying the ZBA felt that it would be in order to waive the fee for this 3rd hearing?
Correct, and
It was
Mr. Servil.
indicated there was no motion made per se, but,
I thought it said it was
Brent
denied to us.
Condon agreed with that too, and we thought that it would be handled by just what we're gonna do right now.
Sure.
But, in the interim, I'm assuming that he's on the agenda, I am assuming they didn't pay the fee because Brent Condon told me that they weren't paying this time. And just to keep things above board and correct, we need to make a motion, if we so desire, to, not charge the fee.
Sure.
There must have been a misunderstanding, because I
I
believe
believe
we
so.
are the only ones
Correct.
that can take that action. Mr. Condon may have understood that we were going to make that request. So that's, I would like to leave it at that.
He's just
that-
trying to, I
Right,
think, make
I'm,
it correct.
yeah, I'm not trying to point fingers
I
at
think we
anyone, I'm just
understand,
trying
it
to
just
straighten out a
requires a
problem.
motion on someone's part. No.
I mean, you can make a motion, but I have a couple questions.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Just, what was the nature of the request that, I mean, were they substantial changes that led to, I mean, denial, and then a 3rd appeal, or they say like, I want 20 feet, I want 10 feet, I want 0, 1 inch? You know what I mean, or are they like, you know what I mean, I wanna understand the case, to understand the merits of why, if somebody said I wanted to build a mansion, and you said no, and they said I wanna build a garage, and you said no, and they
I'd
said.
like to speak to that if I could.
Sure.
The crux, as far as I'm concerned, was the first time they came before us, they were asking for a 24-foot deep garage, which required more variance. I believe, if memory serves me correctly, they're like 20 feet or 40 feet from the road, and of course, our ordinance is 30 feet from the road, so they had 10 feet to work with. But in order to go 24 feet, they needed like a 14-foot variance, I believe. I saw, which many times this happens, you can see by the questions and you can get an idea that, and I felt it was excessive, they're asking for a variance, you don't need 24 feet to park a car. A standard garage is 20 foot deep. So at that time, when I saw that I thought this was not gonna pass, I suggested to the chair that perhaps he might ask the petitioner if he'd wanna table it. The chair stated, no, I don't wanna do that. If you wanna make a motion, go ahead and make it. I did, it was seconded, and it failed. And we accommodate people all the time. If we only have 4 members, we've tabled the case just based on the fact that you have 4 members. So I felt that that was kind of harsh on the part of the
Chair.
zoning board.
Okay.
Well, the zoning board, there was 3 members that voted no, so it wasn't just the chair.
I thought you meant that he wouldn't, I'm sorry.
Well, I don't know what his motivations were.
But the board
but
acted as a whole,
The
the motion
point
happened.
the point is, I felt that they shouldn't have paid the second time around because they should have been allowed to table it. You know, I indicated to and he indicated he was willing to do that. I'd asked him already. But, of course, the motion to table failed, so.
Right, the thing though is I don't know that tabling is the solution. Ultimately, at some point, you know, the applicant certainly should be present, it sounds like they were. They can participate to a certain extent, if not even just to observe the deliberative process. But if they ask for a motion and it's denied, it's denied. I mean, that's it. If they said, oh, well, what about 20 feet or whatever? But I mean, at some point, you ask the question and you ask the zoning board to act. I mean, I don't know that
Was that the
tabling
case?
is the solution.
I'm just looking for a better explanation. I don't wanna know what individuals did, I wanna know what the board did and what they asked for each time it came before.
In
mean,
each
I have nothing
case,
here.
in each case, the resident brought forth a plan, and in each case, they had reduced the request for the variance.
So is the board gonna approve it tomorrow?
I can't speak for the board.
And that's why
Mr. Whip.
I couldn't say that I would give them a freebie if you guys are gonna deny it again. How many times do they get to come and ask?
Well,
I'm gonna take off 6 inches this time and I want another freebie.
first of all, they've never asked for anything for free.
No, but
The resident, as a board member,
Well, I get
am attempting to work with, I'll tell you what my motivation is. I'm attempting to work with a resident that's looking to improve their property.
Right.
Now, it seems to me that we ought to have a process in place where there could be more deliberation than we, and maybe tabling the motion would have been a better idea, you know, and allowing the resident to, modify. It did not happen that way. And I feel in terms of being, and I've been on the board, Mr. Servio's been on much longer than I am. I'm not aware of a situation where someone's brought back 4 different plans and attempting to come to an accommodation. I think this is an unusual situation. And so I think that in fairness, you know, they've paid us $800 to listen to them. We can listen to them one more time at no additional charge. I mean, that's it may not be as logical as you'd like to hear it, Mr. Whip, but that's the practical thing that I'm attempting to resolve.
Was this the case, and I come to him and I can't, is this the case that the, Mr. Huth's office jumped in and said we had to listen?
Yes, it is.
Was this the case that had
Yes.
that like weird ruling and you had to
It was a
listen to him
negative,
again?
it was a negative, it had something to do with the way,
The
the
way you-
motion didn't pass, and then there was a suggestion that there had to be a motion to deny, is what it was, and we did that in the next.
Right,
one.
Rosemary
This case is
Davis,
Affirmative
like
action.
Rosemary
Right.
Davis gave us instructions that we had to rehear, and we did, and they were denied that time. And then actually, they were denied twice that night. Mr. Smith made a motion to get it down to the very inch, because we were rounding it off by 3 or 4 inches, which many times you do. They were still gonna build what they were gonna build, which was 20 foot. And now they're down, I believe, to 15 foot, isn't it?
They want a 5-foot variance.
Yeah, which
I don't
gives
know
them,
what that,
I believe the garage, I looked at the packet and it's only 15 foot deep on one side and 10 foot, it's 20 foot deep. They're wrapping it around the side of the house.
so they're coming with a different proposal.
Right. And I might add that, I understand that that has nothing to do with it, but they are the only house in that whole area. There's a triangle of homes there. They're the only ones without a garage.
Yeah, but that's a question for the ZBA. not
Right, I was just gonna
I
say,
know.
we're getting into the merits of
No.
the case. This is
Right.
a recommendation.
The recommendation-
You brought it forward. If you
I'll
guys
make a
see fit
motion.
to make a
Or
motion,
you
make the
wanna
motion.
Do
and
you know the people's
we'll move
name and
forward.
address? I don't.
Skirpin, I don't have it in
It's
front of me.
12, if the case is 12-16, I saw.
Make a motion.
I'd make a motion that the Board of Trustees waive the $400 fee for the Skirpin case number
It was either 16-12 or 12-16, I forget which it is.
to be determined, that will be heard on January
10th.
10th, thank you.
I'll support that motion. And also, Mr. Condon, I guess, had told them that he wasn't gonna charge, which is fine. I'm fine with that. We just,
Okay,
Okay,
you know,
We-
I'm good.
we discussed it a fair amount. You guys good?
I'm good.
We'll open the floor for public comment.
But I don't know if, you know, if they
Hey,
get
if we
denied
say we're good,
again
let's let the
tomorrow,
public
you know,
comment.
If they get denied tomorrow, maybe someone needs to, you know.
Now, I don't want to particularly talk
Why
about
you
this
being so,
case,
like,
Oh,
in my
guys, about
face
the-
tonight,
I'm saying-
dude.
William
Seriously,
Bardell.
Come on.
but I can
Get
tell
something
you,
like that.
hopefully, the new people on the zoning board of appeals will go with the ordinance. I can tell you one thing, if you buy a house a certain way, that's how you bought that house. And all I'm gonna say, I'm not gonna talk about this case particularly, whatever one resident does affects another resident. And I will say this, the job of that ZBA is to hear the hardship and also to protect the other residents in the area. And that's all I'm gonna say about that. And if you bought a house a certain way and you knew what your dimensions were, that's all I'm saying. So, good luck on both sides. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment, move back to board comment. Is there a further board comment?
I don't know if I feel comfortable waiving a fee when somebody had their case heard, denied, had their case heard, denied, and are a third time before a body. Because they have a choice to say, I mean, I've seen it on ZBA and Planning Commission, where during the middle of the hearing, they say, hey, can we, at their request, the board will step back and not take action on something because they ask for a tabling to revise something. You know, I mean, that's common practice that we
correct.
see before these bodies. And so they had that as an option.
And they did do that, and I made the motion, and it was denied.
And Mr. Wood, I think it could have been, and I'll be frank, I think it could have been handled. I'm not saying whether it should have been denied or approved, that's another matter.
Correct.
But the administrative part of it could have been handled better. That's just a fact.
And the
I mean,
fact,
you like it or not, it's
the
a fact.
fact of the matter is, they're on the agenda, it's been noticed for the people 300 feet away, it's been in the newspaper, I assume, and they haven't paid a fee. So the case is going to be heard tomorrow. Are you going to, say they do get denied, are you gonna expect them to come in and pay the $400 after the fact? They may or may not do that.
No, the reality is no one beside this board has the ability
Right.
to waive that fee. It sounds like one of the employees in good faith did that because they believe that's what the intent was, but that may have been an accidental misstep on their
And
part.
I spoke to no one, so I don't know how it transpired, other than Brent Condon told me that the building department was waiving the fee.
I mean,
That's fine.
to me, I'd be happy to listen to this. I don't know enough about this to waive fees, because in my normal practice of things, I wouldn't waive a fee if somebody came and asked for something several times and was told no twice and they were going for a third time. I don't know enough today to make a decision.
Three different plans too.
I get it. So they took 3 bites at the apple and they don't want a freebie. We're offering them a freebie through this motion. And I don't know enough about the underpinnings of maybe an error that was our board made or something like that to say I need to make a decision on this today.
I wouldn't call it an error, Mr. Wood, I would call it,
If it wasn't an error,
no, I don't think it was
I,
an error.
I don't know
think
that
it-
I don't know that it's wise for us to define what it was.
Okay.
fine.
I think we may be deliberating on an issue longer
Fine.
than we need to, and
Okay.
last thing I wanna do is say something here that we're sorry later we said.
Okay, got it.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Batanti with support by Mr. York to waive, the $400 fee to appear before the ZBA for the Skirpin.
it's 12-16-ZBA.
Right, I don't remember if those numbers might be transferred.
No, that
16,
is what it is.
Is it 12, 16?
Yeah.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion carries. Board-
Mr. Supervisor, also, you're not, in the spirit of ZBA, you know, maybe what we need to do is look at, you know, how we make it easier for residents to come in front of the ZBA.
I totally agree.
I know there's costs involved because there's certain laws we have to follow relative. to
There's costs for
posting.
running an election too, but we don't charge people for that.
But I mean, there's costs for posting notices in the paper, noticing by US mail, you know, people have property, we do have ordinances, and there's certain laws relative to the ZBA as well. But I think we make it very, very difficult for a lot of our residents to make improvements to their homes. And what happens is, and we found this when building with, in the planning commission and along with tech team, is, you know, when you start denying people opportunities to improve their property, you get more blight. Because people will leave properties in a blightful surrounding if they don't have opportunities to improve. When they can improve certain areas of their house, the entire house is improved, which eliminates blight in the long run.
It sure helps.
So I think, you know, as we go forward, I think we should look at that. We should look into how we can make it a little bit easier for our residents, maybe a little less costly. And I'm not saying open the floodgates by no means, but if we can take a property and if we can, you know, have them improve it, and rather than continue to look like a unsightly and turn into something that everyone in the town should be proud of, I think that's a win-win situation.
I agree that we need to look at the fee
We
structure.
raised those fees when the state came along and said, all of a sudden, you gotta notify the whole community instead of just 300 feet around. But then, I think as your predecessor, Adam, came up with, by investigating, someone came up, I don't know who to give credit for, but basically, we give a synopsis of what, instead of printing verbatim what all of the cases are, which took half a sheet of newspaper, we were spending $1,200-1,500 for notice, and now it's only a fraction of that, so possibly they can lower the fees
Right,
again. They
right.
used to be like $250 or $275, went up to $400.
But keep in mind, it's more than just fees, because let's say this variance was granted for this resident. Let's say right now he has a gravel driveway. Let's say he really doesn't have any landscaping. If he's gonna add this addition to his garage and he gets granted that addition, maybe he pours a concrete driveway, maybe that's part of it. Maybe he adds the landscaping and maybe he tidies up the entire lot.
He's already done all of that according to a letter that that somebody
and
else
again,
sent to
and that's-
ZBA.
And I don't wanna, you know, pigeonhole this resident. I'm talking in general. I think in general, improvements, and when we offer people to do improvements, everything gets improved.
There's
So
an
that's just
infectious
my
nature. Yep, and there's
You
some
know-
spin-offs from it.
And there's something, I'll take just one more minute on this. We need two, the township needs two new alternates. Steve Marino is one alternate, and the last couple of times he was asked if he had conflicts, and I assume he's only gonna be worse now. And the other gentleman has never served. When he was asked 3 or 4 times, for whatever reason, he denied. I don't know if their terms are still active, but if they are, I'd suggest you call them and ask them if they're not gonna participate to resign, so you can appoint someone different.
You know, you talk about the ZBA, I always thought it was sort of crazy, somebody's paying $400 and they're coming for a fence permit. The whole fence is like $2,000, you know?
Yep, we discussed that, I think, at the workshop, where we said we need to take a look at that, so that's kind of on our parking lot
Yeah,
list.
so thank you very much,
Yep.
Mr. Supervisor.
Board, I was remiss in not bringing something up. When we had the discussion regarding the multiplier for the firefighters union contract, the study that we all saw that's required before we act had a cost of $2,500. So the supplemental valuation cost $2,500, so I'd be looking for a motion to authorize payment to Gabriel Roder Smith in the amount of $2,500 for the valuation.
Support.
All right. Discussion? Public comment on that issue? No, sir. Okay. Okay, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. All right, we'll open up the floor for public comments. They can be about anything, and we ask that you limit them to 5 minutes in length.
William Bardell, 20-year resident. I just want to comment real quick on, I agree with you, Mr. Tominello, about people improving their home. But I want to say one thing. If somebody's going to build something and they're going to build it, I'm just going to say any case in general. close to the property line when the side yard setback is 5 feet. Just in general, I'm not talking about any particular case. And let's say the house next door is a very small house, and they could tear that house down and build a big boom town house, a big McMansion, and be within their 5 foot from the property line. And then, let's say this guy builds too close to the property line. My thing is, why should the guy who tears down an old bungalow and puts up a big McMansion and follows the ordinance of the 5 feet, he's got his 5 feet, and then all of a sudden, boom, he's hitting a wall. He doesn't get that 10 foot. So 5 foot on his side, 5 foot on my side. So that's the other side of the story. So, but Mr. Brent Condon could maybe somehow facilitate real quick with any applicant to say, well, hey, why don't you try putting that family room on the other side of the house, or put that garage on the other side of the house, or something like that. Not getting into any particular case, but hopefully Mr. Condon will have the depth in the very near future to do some assistance on these projects and help out cleaning up our township. That's all I want to say about that. The only thing I want to talk about is the sinkhole situation. You're going to hear a lot of rumors on. What I've heard about the sinkhole in Fraser is they are not going to actually know what the cause is until the temporary bypass is completed and that sewer bypass is bone dry. Once that sewer is bone dry, they can figure out what happened. Could it be because of lack of expansion joints? Could it be worker error? Could it be somebody drilled into the pipe, weakened the pipe to put a sensor in and cracked the pipe, didn't run the drill reverse to start it, or didn't have a sharp, it could be anything. Could it be because of fracking, because of earth moving in fracking? You know, the fracking solution is unregulated. There's no safety data sheets on fracking, and I don't want to tell you which political party didn't want that to be regulated. I'm going to keep my mouth shut, my pie hole shut on that one. I'll keep my mouth shut. But the fracking solution is not regulated, and we don't know what fracking does to the earth. So we don't know what the problem is out there, but I'm sure we'll find out as soon as that bypass, that temporary bypass gets done and gets completed. They were going to take a look at all that and then find out what's going on. The other thing I want to talk about real quick, with the weather changing, and I know everybody enjoys getting out on the ice, I want to remind board members and residents to please be safe out on the ice. I know the winters are short. There's a lot of good times out there. Please be safe out there on the ice. Check your weather report. Check the ice. You know you're going to need a 170-pound man is going to need at least 4 inches of ice out there. Then you start bringing your skidoos and your equipment out there. You're going to need more. So always check with that. Be safe out there on the ice, and hopefully we'll get a little bit of winter this year. The other thing I want to talk about real quick is I'd like everybody to please come out and check out Save Lake St. Clair on Facebook. We've got a lot of new stuff coming in, and you may find very interesting. And with that, board members and residents, have a safe and wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. Is there any board comment?
I'd just comment on one speculation about fracking. To point out that the last 2 breaks on that same interceptor were broken before we had fracking here, and I don't think there is any fracking very close to that anyway.
Yeah.
In addition, 696, back when, a few years after it was built, right at the interchange going westbound, they were working there for 2 years, grouting to try to stabilize a sewer line there. I think that was a storm sewer net, but I would speculate it's probably just the ground conditions that we have in Macomb County, that's all.
Well, there are, just in conversation with some service providers for those kinds of things, there are, robots that they have, to basically go down and can, see things. So I think they have a little bit of an idea, but, we'll find out, I'm sure eventually. There's not much we can do. And sounds like they're working on it as fast as they can to get some bypass pumping in place, so.
And they just had those cameras in there 2 or 3 years ago when they put all those gates in. So it probably wasn't broken then, but
Yeah. All right, well, we do have a closed session, on our agenda to discuss negotiations with, IAFF 1737, as well as to get an attorney's opinion on a matter. So, I'd be looking for a motion to enter into closed session.
I don't feel that attorney's opinion, we should be doing it in closed session.
Well, let me just say this, the attorney's opinion, I think should be clarified, it's regarding appointment to the ZBA. But I'd like to address that, if you have a question to me about that being in closed session.
It just seems to me that would be an open session item.
Well, it can be,
And I
but
could
the
be wrong.
fact is that the Attorney General has said that any opinion that I come here with, you are allowed to talk to me in closed session because it's a confidential relationship we have. So it could be either or, I think it's appropriate for closed, but if you wanna talk about it after, we can do that too.
I'm just one person on the board.
Sure.
I'm not making any more comments.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion to
So
enter
moved.
into closed session to discuss negotiations with IAFF 1737, as well as an attorney's opinion
Regarding ZBA matter.
regarding the ZBA appointment matter. Motion by Mr. Tominello, support by Mr. Badkins.
10:05?